Japan's tariff talks with the U.S. this week did not proceed as expected, with Trump's abrupt involvement in the discussion. How should South Korea make itself ready for its own negotiations next week? We are joined by Professor Shim Myungkyu. Welcome back, Professor Shim.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Why do you think Trump joined the discussions out of nowhere, or is it not a surprise that it's Trump who did so?
Yes, as you just pointed out, it's not a surprise move. It seems that all the steps we have observed are in line with his and his administration's regular strategy for the negotiation. It particularly works for countries like South Korea, which is a small open economy that heavily depends on the US and export, so that lacks of negotiation power. What the US first does is to suggest a policy that the other countries cannot really endure. It is associated with a sort of threat that it will not negotiate on it to make the suggestions more credible. And then they continue to talk after some time, as we have already seen in his first term. In this sense, the series of current events are not that shocking, while some of them are even worse than we could imagine.
Well, the U.S. reportedly also mentioned a potential increase in Japan's defense budget. What should South Korea do if the U.S. tries to squeeze in a defense cost-sharing deal at next week's meeting? I mean, should we play along or what?
Yes, it's natural to expect that the U.S. will try to squeeze a defense cost-sharing deal with Korea, like it does with Japan. With that, I think one of the best strategies would be not to put it on the table at first and wait as long as it can. It seems that the Trump administration wants to connect the negotiation on the trade with the renegotiation of defense budget. And from the perspective of Korea, I don't believe that it will gain much from suggesting the adjustment of defense budget at first, because it could only lower the negotiation power of Korea. It should first focus on the trade deal itself and try its best to close the deal. I know it's not that easy to separate the two issues, but it does not imply that the Korean government needs to suggest a deal before it can make a deal with the US without increasing the defense budget.
So tariff talks first for South Korea. Now, the U.S. and Japan are also looking to arrange another round of talks this month, which means it's going to be hard for South Korea to make it a one-shot deal. What should South Korea aim for at the first meeting next week then, Professor Shim?
Yes, it will take some time to make a deal. I think there are two important tasks at the first meeting. First, Korean government needs to figure out what the U.S. officials really want. Second, it needs to persuade the U.S. officials with the logic and the data that free trade with lower tariffs can really improve the welfare of both the U.S. and Korea and the other countries. As is already well reported, higher tariffs with greater uncertainty surrounding the world seems to make the U.S. economy enter the recession, while it can potentially increase the price level. Since this situation will not be endurable for most of the U.S. people, I think having patience with the negotiation procedure is really needed, because the U.S. government will need to accommodate both their worsening economic situations and their gains from the negotiation.
And it's South Korea's finance minister who will be leading the delegation to the U.S. next week. He said South Korea will never rush the negotiations with the U.S. Shouldn't we speed things up?
Yeah, I agree with him in the sense that we should not rush the negotiations with the U.S. First, so they have given the 90-day delay, but that is not really guaranteed. It can be shortened or further delayed, depending on the talks with other countries. Actually, this is what we have already seen in the last few days. The current U.S. administration first claimed that they will have no renegotiation with the other countries, but then they changed their policy very frequently, depending on the side effect that they could not imagine, like the crash of the stock market. So 90-day delay seems to be more like a guide, which can be more flexible than what we first thought. And also, rushing to finish the deal is not good for Korea because it means that the Korean government should provide a deal that the US government can take right now, which would need more sacrifice of the Korean economy.
Then are you saying that all tariff deals won't be concluded within the 90 days? Because there are easily over 70 countries for the US to talk to.
Yes, as you just pointed out, there are more than 70 countries waiting to negotiate with the US. And negotiation is like a ping pong. Each country suggests a deal, and it takes a lot of time to agree on a deal that both countries are satisfied after several rounds of renegotiation. Also, the US government seems to wait for the changes in the stance of China on the trade, which seems to take even more time. So if we take all these factors together, I think there will be further changes in the 90 days delay at some point, which implies that we should not rush to make a deal.
All right, Professor Shim, thank you so much for connecting with us this morning. You enjoy your evening there.
Thank you.